Public comments on study session related items. Okay, we will have a discussion on the City of Manistee hosting the Gus Macker from Mr. Scott McNeil.
Evening. Thanks for inviting myself to come to this meeting. I'm joined today by Patty Donovan. I'm the owner of Gus Macker. Started my mom and dad's driveway when I was a kid. Patty's my vice president and handles community relations, some of our clerical stuff that we do with the tournaments. Just a brief overview. It started 49 years ago in Lowell, Michigan. Lowell's down by Grand Rapids. I was a frustrated basketball player because I'm vertically challenged. My mom and dad had a great driveway 2 blocks from the high school, and so 18 of us got together and played for $1 a piece. The winning team got $18, and we all had weird nicknames. Growing up, my nickname was Gus Macker because my last name is McNeil. People call me Mac. Somebody threw Gus on the front of it. So now I travel around the country doing what I did in my driveway. I was a school teacher and a high school basketball coach north of Grand Rapids in Kent City, Michigan for about 6-7 years in the 80s. And then Sports Illustrated wrote an article in 1985. It was about 11 or 12 page feature story, and it turned me into a national situation. So I had to decide if I was going to travel around the country or just continue to teach. Sometimes I question my decision there because I'd be retired by this time, but I am enjoying myself traveling from city to city. Currently, we're doing about 25 cities around the country. I gave you a little package of information. On the left-hand side, it's some background stuff. This being our 49th year, I included some stuff on our 50th year, which would be 2024. And then on the right, I included some demographics from your most closest city around here, which is pretty obvious, is Ludington, but I also included some national demographics from last year, the tour from this year, and then at the very end, a proposal that we use when we talk to new communities. I can touch upon a little bit about Ludington. Ludington was up for renewal on their contract with us, and they decided not to do it. Ludington was run by a Chamber of Commerce. Some cities I work with YMCAs, other cities local school groups, Rotary service clubs. Sometimes it's a visitor convention bureau. Just kind of varies from town to town. Happens to be the chamber that we were working with in Ludington. They were on year 30 or 31, and I think there's a little bit of burnout in Ludington on the Gus Macker. Same committee on that committee that did it locally, let's say there are 15 people or so, probably at least half to 2/3 of them have been there all 30 years. So they were a little tired of doing the Macker over and over again. So I think burnout would be reason number one. I think the other issues they ran into in Ludington is sponsorship was tough for them to come by. So financially making it worthwhile, they had based their model on success with my event with 1,000 teams or 900 to 1,000 teams. If they had that many teams, they do very well. They lost 2 years with COVID. Most of the rest of us here in the state lost a year, but they went 2 years without it. So coming out of COVID, instead of getting 800, 900 or 1,000 teams, they only ended up with 500 teams in 22. They went up close to 600 teams this past year, but still they were relying in our model for most of the player fees to cover their expenses to run the event versus local sponsorship. I charge a fee. This is not a franchise, but it's very similar to that. The local group has a lot of ownership, so the local group decides are they going to hire us to do a Macker with them. The partnership is unique. I own the portable baskets. I take care of the insurance. I send a team in to run the event on the weekend. There's a lot of other aspects. We do a training session. We provide a lot of counseling year-round, a lot of support with equipment and that type of stuff when it comes to the weekend of the event. The local entity gets most of their funds from a couple different aspects. They get funds from the teams registering, but they go and get local sponsorships too, which is really where that's where primarily the local groups make their money. An average Macker tournament maybe makes 15 to 20,000 in a net proceeds. Some tournaments are quite a bit higher than that. There's a few that are a little bit smaller. A lot of times it's dictated by the number of teams and or, like I said, sponsorships. When we come to new groups, we recommend that local group try to find 20,000 or more in local sponsorship. I think Ludington was doing that, but with the additional number of teams, and there's some other aspects to what they were running into with their event, they weren't netting enough to make it work. And again, I can keep talking a little bit, give you a little background on why that situation's a little strange for us. Being at the event this year, we noticed that the chamber was leaning on the city of Ludington to provide quite a few services through their DPW. And that jacked up the local amount of support from the city to $24,000 or $25,000 at overtime costs. And so the city was looking to get that reimbursed through the tournament, and the chamber was going, we don't see enough net to do that. So that's another reason why they didn't. So when the burnout happened and then financially it didn't work, in their minds, it was an easy decision. Confusing to the general public because it's my most popular tournament on my tour for the last 10 years or so, because it's right on the beach. And our players travel all over the place, but a lot of them come from all over the country to play in the Ludington event. I attempted with the city to take it on and own it for a year or two as a company, with the idea that I could find another nonprofit to take it on, like the schools or somebody else. But the city needed upfront to get reimbursed for their costs before we would go very much further, and I just decided it wasn't really worth it for that. Right now we have about 12 cities in the state of Michigan. So out of 25, half of them are Michigan cities. I have at least 20 requests, if not more, that are solid requests here in Michigan. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm saturated in the state. I really need more. Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, those kind of states coming through with teams. We still play a lot of places, but we don't have as many in the Midwest as we typically did back in the day. But again, I could play every weekend in Michigan. So when your request came, and it came from you, but I had a multitude of requests from the casino thinking, why don't you come over here? Of course, we jumped at it because we think this would be a good replacement for Ludington. I don't know that I would sit here and tell you that we would anticipate it would replace Ludington totally, but it's a great location just because you're beachfront and your community is very resort oriented, which is what our players looked for in the Ludington event. Our proposal and how we work is the local city pays us 3 different ways. They pay us $10,000 annually plus 30% of what the players pay, and then they pay us a $2,000, we call it a travel stipend. I hire a staff of about 12 plus people, especially in Ludington. There might have been 16 that came in from our staff that I hire. I get them to the site. The local group works with us and getting them a place to stay over the weekend. But that's part of what I provide, but then I take care of the insurance, the hoops, the stages, and a lot of the support nationally because the teams come online and register for the most part today. So we have a national website. I have a software program that divides the teams into grouping and so forth. So I do all the scheduling. The idea was to make Gus Macker handle all the basketball stuff, all the tournament stuff. The local people take care of promoting it locally, getting volunteers to work with our team. So the marriage works really well, and we think it works very positively. It was a unique time for Patty and I to come over. We just finished our Belding event, which is our hometown event. We had just shy of 400 teams. We had 399 teams in a town about the same size as this. And again, next year's our 50th. Other things that I should mention, Patty? I can talk a lot. That's part of my problem. And that's why I don't have a very good voice. I'm in day like 40 or 50 in a row without a break. So I've been doing a lot of events in a row. We go to Midland this weekend. We have 315, 320 teams in Midland. Year number 6 in a row? 6 in a row for Midland. Our agreements are a 3-year agreement, but they're really not, because after your first year, you can opt out after that first year. So if you did an agreement with Gus Macker and you decide after first year you don't want to do it anymore, you can just walk away from the agreement. If you do year number 2, it's required that you do number 3. I could keep talking forever.
I have some questions.
Yeah,
before
go
we get
ahead.
too
You guys
far.
can ask anything you want. I,
Trying to-
again, really appreciate you asking us. It's very nice of you guys to have us come, so.
I'm trying to take some notes here. So, and you might have already said this, so, is it the volunteers that take care of everything in other cities besides, and not the DPW? Like, who did it before?
I was using Ludington as an example. We noticed that the Ludington DPW put out the trash barrels, took up the trash barrels. They did a lot of work that a local volunteer group in Belding this past weekend, our cross-country and track coaches and kids did all the trash. We, of course, rented the dumpsters and had physical receptacles to go out, but in Ludington, their DPW is doing all of that. The other issue that you run into in a beachfront town is they spend a lot of time getting the sand off the streets and working on preparation of the park. So a lot of that DPW cost was there too. But we just noticed a lot of times they were leaning on, and I think that's because they did this with 1,500 teams. Remember, the peak of Ludington was like 1,500 teams that they'd had over the years. The same committee was doing that. When they went to do registration and some other things, they were still using a system for 1,500 teams. Where in today's Macker world, our biggest event is that Ludington event at 600 teams. Belding second at about 400 teams. An average Macker today is 200, 250 teams.
So
It's
how-
a lot different than back in the 90s where this event was in the thousands and thousands of teams.
How many would you suggest for Manistee?
Again, a lot will come down to what Bill and I have talked about. Patty and I used our little wheel where the maestros of doing maps. So we went over to look at Douglas Park and could discuss that. My suggestion, if you were going to do an event, is not to try to directly take over Ludington, even though everybody's going to compare you to the Ludington event. And if you had 300 teams your first time, I think that'd be very good. And I think it'd turn into a very popular event. But I think you'd want to grow into it a little bit versus just say whatever you can get. I think date-wise is going to be interesting to decide upon. And so just kind of get an idea.
Okay, I got another question for that.
Yeah,
real
you guys
quick.
can
Okay,
throw them at me.
If we had 300 teams, like how many like hotel rooms would we need? How many hotels? Like, do they all book up in Ludington? Do we have enough to house everybody?
Ludington is a little different than a normal Macker tournament. 2 weeks ago, I was in Jackson. Well, actually, I was in Flint. The weekend before, I was in Jackson. I was in Iron Mountain, Michigan. I was in New York State. And Ludington has a very high percentage of people that stay in the park and actually camp out. They still use the hotel rooms too. And there's a bigger amount of spectators at Ludington than at another Macker. A normal Macker for one player, you can expect about, am I saying it right, five spectators per one player. Ludington may be more like 10 or 15 per player because a lot of people just come to hang out. Another challenge in Ludington, if you're not aware, and I'm sorry I'm using all these, but you get a lot of bombardment of what's going on with this decision not to have a Macker again. Ludington's in Stern Park, which has an open container law in the park. So a lot of the time by the police department was crowd control because players and or spectators were drinking quite a bit. In today's world, if you go to Ludington today, the first thing they would admit, it's not like it was 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago, they spent a lot of time with problem players after hours at local restaurants or bars, intoxicated, maybe having problems with them there at the tournament, because the average age of the players was very adult. Most of the players were adult. In today's MAC, we just came away from a tournament that probably had 80% under the age of 18. So our event is very, very youth-oriented and very family-oriented compared to what it was 10 years ago. But again, that would be one of the downsides of Macker and Ludington, is there's alcohol on site. We don't do other events with alcohol at the tournament site. I mean, we are kind of anti-alcohol because of the kid following to this event. But in Ludington, they had to because it's a state park and it has an open container. So it's a very tailgating atmosphere, which people come with pop-ups to our tournaments, just like in Belding, and they camp out with mom, dad, grandpa, and grandma, and everything else, but there's not alcohol out there. That makes sense a little bit. So the police were challenged by that a little bit in Ludington.
I have a question that kind of piggybacks on what the mayor asked. So you mentioned that you guys provide a team to kind of run this event. So I kind of reached out to some people I know in Ludington and just asked because it has been such a staple in their community.
Sure, for a long time.
And they mentioned that, you know, volunteers were a huge issue for them, and that was part of the reason that they gave it up. They said that on average they found that they needed to be between 400 and 600 volunteers to make this event like go.
Right.
And so I guess I'm just wondering, because you had kind of mentioned like the DPW and that being relied on heavily, what do you anticipate like from other communities? What would you need volunteers for?
A volunteer number at your tournament should be 150 to 200 people max. So when we we just did our registration at our event for 400 teams, and we probably did it with 24 people, 24. Ludington wanted 120, 130 people.
Okay. And what do you envision that those volunteers would be doing that your team's not going to do?
Explain how we come in with our staff who oversees volunteers.
So what we do is we bring this 12 people I'm talking about, and one's in charge of the officials. One is in charge of when the players check in, we call it registration. One of them is in charge of the public address system. One is in the foreman that's in charge of setting up the portable baskets. So each of these people are supervisors. They've been doing it all over the place. They meet a group of volunteers, like in Belding, the boys' basketball team showed up to set up the portable baskets. And they needed about 12 to 15 of them. And then I was talking about registration. We were using as an example, Ludington was using what they did in the past for registration. And that's why their numbers were so high. And the people that had been on the committee, they were kind of set that that was the way they were going to do it because that's the way Ludington did it, which is fine. But in today's world, I can't do that market to market. I can't come in and look at a town like Manistee and say, you got to have 500 or 600 volunteers. I mean, that just isn't realistic. So we build a model where these staff come in and manage or help do this event, but they do need volunteers, but not quite the numbers that might have been used in Ludington. And I think that was frustrating to Ludington because I think they really felt they needed to have that to get what they needed as support for the event. We weren't quite in agreement on that at the end, but.
So if there's an issue at your event, like, do you provide some type of, like, I guess I'd say like security, like a buffer that somebody is going to go address something before we have to contact the police if there's an issue?
Yes, usually we work with the police department locally. Patty and I work in Belding. We work with the Iona County Emergency Services, and we have a hospital. And we also have the police and fire department, and we have an ambulance service, Life EMS, and they all work with us on a management plan. My staff uses walkie-talkies that also are connected to the police, And then my staff, when one of your officials on a court or one of your volunteers has an issue, my staff would then step in and handle that situation once you get to that point. They will oversee those issues that you have. And if we had to ask somebody to leave, my staff would do that. They would then maybe call the police and ask for assistance. But we normally would be the buffer between your volunteers and the police, fire, or anything. Same with weather. 2 days ago, we just experienced a rainstorm 2 to 3 hours before our event was to conclude on Sunday afternoon. So one of the main things somebody might ask us as a new group is, well, how do you handle the weather? We had to stop play for a while, knew what our weather was based on working with the fire department and the local experts on weather based on what we saw coming in. And we delayed games and waited, and then we came back and played for a short period of time, and then we got a storm again. And so at the very end, we couldn't finish our event. So we had to proclaim champions and give winners and losers out based on who had won games up to that point and everything. So we got a very good system on all of that kind of stuff, but we definitely need local volunteers to help because of the numbers of people. That 12 people, staff couldn't do the whole thing on their own, but definitely with assistance.
City manager, Bill, do we commit resources to the sleigh bell stuff? Don't we get reimbursed for DPW expenses at a lot of our stuff now? We didn't used to, but do we now?
We did not, no, it's been, yeah, we help out community events. Other cities I've worked, we have made sure we're getting reimbursed for that, but not up to this point in City of Manistee.
Can we expend city tax dollars for a $10,000 license and promotion fee and for consulting fees? Is that a legal expenditure of tax dollars?
I could talk with the city attorney about it. I think the idea would be to break even with this if we were to take this on, but it sounds like other communities have, but I can talk to our city attorney to confirm that.
Are other communities where the city is actually sponsoring the event?
It sounds like you said they typically sign a contract.
The city Parks and Rec Department, and it goes through their recreation department at the city, but the city obviously is involved in a few of our events. I could get you who is into each city, like a list of who does every city, but yeah, there are some cities that are involved.
But to Councilman Bachman's point, did the city actually, it signs the contract with Gus Macker?
That's the one where in Wakefield does that.
Yes, Wakefield does it.
We're in Wakefield, Michigan. You're not going to know where that is. It's way up in the UP, far northwest corner. They sign a contract directly with us. We'd have to go through our list of cities, but there are other cities that have worked with us in the past that have done that. Or, as a counter, you might say to one of the groups that you'll support the group and then have the Rotary or somebody else take it on as a local group too, if you wanted to do that in partnership.
You mentioned the casino. Has the casino reached out to you?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I've only contacted a couple people because I probably got 4 or 5, and I don't think they all know that each other has contacted me. So it's kind of right now, I haven't really gone to them yet. We do have a few events. We do one with the tribe in New Mexico. We're up in the mountains, and we're on a casino through a reservation. Do you know how many other casinos?
I don't think we do any other.
There may not be any others directly. There's some that are related to casinos. Again, part of our thing is, and I know some casinos are probably trying to get a more family image, so ours would be a great event for them. If the city comes to me first, I'm probably going to go to the city first and not go to the casino. It's kind of going back to the alcohol thing. That caused me some of the issues at Ludington a number of years ago with the police. I mean, they really bought into helping us, and I can't say thank you enough. The mayor right now was the city police chief at that time, and he was very helpful. But it was a handful for them to handle some of those teams. So us not necessarily going to the casino first would probably be the best decision for us based on where our company is at this point.
Can you tell them a little bit on Barb's success in Iron Mountain?
Yeah, I kind of can go from one end of the spectrum to the other. Probably our most successful tournament is Iron Mountain currently. It's a children's museum. started a year or two ago. They netted last year in 2022, they netted $100,000 with the Gus Macker in one weekend. They only had 200 teams. The way they did it is they had $120,000 in local sponsorship. I think they had 120 sponsors too in 2022. I know they had 150 this year. I haven't heard her tally yet, but again, depending on who gets involved locally and how it's interpreted, really makes a Gus Macker either successful or not successful. I think my players don't really understand that. They think I decided not to go to Ludington. I would play Ludington again. It just, again, how it's interpreted locally is the decision. So the decision's really a local decision.
Besides the beach area that we have, is there any other place you looked at where they could hold something like that?
Well, we looked at the main street. Patty and I, she got a pair of shoes from Glicks. We were pretty excited about that. They were on sale. So we loved your downtown streets. Again, I think the players immediately, their first reaction is Manistee going to take the place of Ludington? We went out to Douglas Park. The issue with the parking lot, it's huge. I don't, have any of you been to my events before? Have you been to a parking lot event? We just put one in Newaygo County. Tell me the number of teams. 300, around 300 teams. Year number 2, they'll probably net 50 to 75,000 on their event. It's the Chamber of Commerce of Newaygo County, and they put it on at Grant Middle School in a parking lot. Very congested. Now, a lot of my players like it because they can park a block away and walk in and play, so it's convenient, especially the older players. But the family atmosphere of being in a street and having yourself not on top of other courts and be able to sit next to the court with grandma and grandpa and so forth, so on, it's kind of what it's like at a Macker. So I looked at Douglas Park, and the first thing I thought of is it would be very congested if you threw all of Ludington into that event, which I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen, but if you sent 300 or 400 teams into Douglas Park, it would be very congested. We then started looking at the streets around there, and you got beautiful streets. The problem is they're about half the width that we need. Until you get up, on your bluff, you have like a angled parking in there, and there's probably 6 courts there. And then when you get behind your new hotel, there's a parking lot there that you could get quite a few in. So we started working with that. The other issue at Douglas Park is the current pavement is a little rough. We use a duct tape, 2-inch duct tape in colors to mark our boundaries, and then when the tournament's over, we pull up the duct tape. It'd be tough to get the duct tape to stick because it's kind of rough, and it might be rough for players and fans to play on, so that might be an issue there. Anyway, so you could do a combination of the parking lot and maybe some of the streets around it. That would be really cool, because I mean, you've got the lake right there, which is what draws people to it.
So I just want to go back to my question. Do you bring in like your stats and stuff like that, and you say, hey, okay, this area, I wouldn't exceed this many teams because you can only house this many people, you've only got this many police officers, first responders. Like, I don't want to say we have, 500 teams and we have nowhere to house thousands of people, we don't have enough officers. So is that something that you do? You look at the area?
Yeah, we would work with you. I looked at this as a very preliminary thing with Bill, quite honestly. I was just going to come in and brainstorm and tell you what I do, and then have you tell, and then I'd come back again, and we'd probably sit down seriously and go, okay, where do you want to have it? What are you afraid of? Do you only want X number of teams? Because this is the issues you could run into if you get over a certain number.
Okay, that was my concern.
Yeah, that would totally be. We allow the local groups to actually put a limit if they want. Like they may say, I don't want 200. In fact, I think the Newaygo County group might have said we only want 200 the first year, so they limited it, and that's happened before to us, and it works really well. So
Okay.
we're talking to other people in your area just so we kind of get an idea. The Traverse City is very enthusiastic through their Visitor Convention Bureau group or their visitors group. We have a lot of others, obviously, down south of Grand Rapids, South Haven has talked to. So anybody that heard Ludington didn't want to do, if they even could see the beach or lake, they immediately contacted me and said, Muskegon, everybody else. But we get so many hundreds of requests, and we probably do 5 to 10 new ones a season because it's hard to do one of our events. It's expensive. The good news is if you do it in your first year or two, you're not going to believe the following that will come to this event by word of mouth. And the following is phenomenal. That's, again, what they experienced in Ludington over the years. But again, it's kind of taking a look at the pluses and the minuses of what our event is. And that's why the local group really dictates whether this works or not works, and how we work together.
So I have a couple of questions. First off, you say you get 30% of the team's entry fee. What is the team's entry?
Team entry fee is a decision locally, currently $160 to around $200 a team. You guys would decide in $4 increments. So you might say, I want to do it at 168. I think Ludington was 180. So you guys can decide that, and you may decide that before you agree to sign an agreement with us. You might try to see, hey, can I find a sponsor or two? Would the casino support it with money? Probably. You might find a couple, you might say, will Meyer support it? Will this group support it? You might want to see you get verbally, because most of the time when we go to talk to new cities, we would recommend that you get concrete support financially, that when you go do the budget, you're going to net money enough that makes sense for you to do it. So we would work with you on that, showing you proposals and so forth. Patty, what she does is she created something called the Macker Magic Manual, and it's this A to Z how to do this. And we have you come to a conference for 2 days. It's like a Macker convention with all these other cities. And you hear the woman from Iron Mountain tell you how she did it. And you hear other cities tell about how they've done it for 25 years or so. And then you interact with them, and we give you training and so forth. And so part of that would be trying to figure out prior to that whether you have the support here financially to make something like this work. We wouldn't want to enter into anything where financially you weren't going to net enough to make you keep doing it. Because for us, it's going to take a handful of years for you to get used to doing it and get it into a machine like they did in Ludington. So our goal is for you to do it for a long period of time.
So do you usually have like one point person that kind of heads it up in the city that you're working with, or how does
On the
structure-
weekend, my operational staff comes in. My operational staff is made up of somebody that's 40 years, veteran of the correctional facilities in Ionia as a recreation director. I have ex-teachers, a banker, a college basketball coach, and then a lot of different people that have been part of my staff. Those are the team that comes in the weekend. But prior to that, right now, you'd be working with myself and Patty, or maybe somebody else. There's only 4 full-time people in my office, and our office is in Belding. And then I have a lot of seasonal people that leave their job on the weekends to travel around the country. I have a team in New York State, I have a team in New Mexico, I have a team here in the Midwest, quite a few teams, but the event managers that head up my teams at the events are all very experienced people that run these events. But in between, you would be working directly with us at our office year-round. Patty and I would go and meet with Ludington and the chamber and their committee and so forth in the off-seasons, so.
Any more questions?
You can ask me anything, don't be scared.
I just have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you said officials, is that like volunteers that are?
Yeah,
officials?
that's the next level. For anybody that you tell, hey, we're gonna bring a Macker. It started in my driveway with the players calling their own fouls and violations. So as I got bigger and bigger and started traveling the country, that's the system. So then as it went along into the 90s and got very massive in size, we created a person nicknamed or called the Gusbuster, which was a person that was a court monitor on the court that still allowed the players to call their own fouls and violations. They were volunteers, and they got free T-shirt, a cap, so forth for helping. That got very hard to manage. So in the 2000s, 3-on-3 isn't nearly the popular event it was because it got to be very rough. So when you talk to people that played back in the day, they may go, "Oh my gosh, it was like a football game instead of a basketball game." Today, we require all our cities to have game officials, high school, college, middle school, registered officials in black and white stripes, and we call the fouls and violations. The downside is the local group we work with has to hire those people locally. And we have a system, how it works and so forth, but it is a line item on your budget. And would be something as you start to do a budget, we would show you. But you would hire from the region, and there's some associations that are in your region. We have a group out of Muskegon, a group out of Grand Rapids. You might find a group locally here, and they are hired, and they actually go out and help run the games.
But you would give us a number. I guess the only reason I'm asking is it is very difficult to find officials for
Yep.
like high school games. And
Yep,
stuff
it
like
is
that.
very hard.
So I'm just wanting to make sure, like, if we're looking at planning ahead, if you said, if you have this number of teams, you're gonna need this number of
Yep,
officials. We can
exactly.
Start to plan that to even make sure it's a possibility to get
Yes,
this.
definitely would work. We'd be working very hard. Again, even before you sign an agreement with us, you would understand all of that stuff. My suggestion is if you decide to do it as a city council, that you choose 2 or 3 people and we sit down in a budget meeting and actually walk through each line item. But that would be one of the costs, and that's one of the downsides.
I'm
To clean it up, we used officials, basically.
sorry. I'm noticing on this thing that you guys sent us, it says, so we provide the volunteer T-shirts and we provide the player T-shirts?
There's 2 things that are required that you provide in the system, is the trophies and the T-shirts are through a national system. You would then buy them through the national vendor that does them, separate from our company. They're at $5 a piece for a player T-shirt currently. And then the trophies have a cost, and the trophy are a die-cast Macker trophy. That's why they play for those trophies. But, yeah, that would be a cost.
Licensing fee and all those other fees.
Yep, exactly.
Anybody else? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. Again, you're welcome to call us. You have our phone number. You can email me any questions. Again, appreciate you having us. Thank
Thank
you.
Thanks, Scott. And when would we have to let you know by? If that's,
We normally have this convention in February. We've moved it because it's our 50th. We moved it into November. So you would have to know probably beginning of October as an example.
okay. Thank you.
Would work with you on that. Again, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have a discussion.
Sorry, can we add one thing? We did bring you T-shirts. So I'm going to leave.
Okay,
From our tournament this weekend, we had extras, so.
okay, thank you. Discussion on the Waterworks building, Mr. Gamble. Which one?
Bottom one. Thank you. So about a month ago, the Historic Museum, Mark Federer informed me they were moving out. They gave us the keys back to the Waterworks building, and it's a very visible, very historic building. The Historic Museum was in there for many years. So it prompted a debate, I wanted to talk to council at the study session about, whether it be selling the building. It is one of our RRC sites. There's also potentially some SHPO grants, maybe to renovate. Also, there's some potential talking with Tracy Davis about, it's a tax incentive we could do to the area. There's a couple other buildings, properties in that area that this could maybe be combined with to do a bigger development of some sort. So I just wanted to bring this up to council, get each council member's take on the building and what they'd like to see there in the future. It doesn't have heating and cooling. The nice thing is we do have a new roof on it, so we don't have the degradation from that aspect. We've fixed that trim issue that was brought up at a previous council meeting. So I think the big thing is too, if we did end up selling it, I think making sure that there was investment within a certain amount of years, or we'd be able to buy it back, something like that. So there's a number of ways we can do this if we wanted to see some development there, but I guess I wanted to open it up to council to get your take, each individual take.
So what are the options? What can we do with it if we don't sell it? Like what?
So potentially we could build out the interior. And Mark, I know that's, it being an RRC site, sometimes you could do an RFP for someone to come in and develop.
But to make it what? Like that's what I'm,
Yeah, you'd have to, I guess that's the thing, you'd have to have a little bit of a vision. Maybe you'd ask people to propose a vision to you about what they do with it, and we could, they'd offer a price and a vision. So we'd have to have an RFP committee. That would be kind of the first step. We wanted to do something like that.
and if we sold it, could we put restrictions on what they can do with it?
I would think to a certain degree,
Okay.
but.
Have you had anybody inquire about purchasing this property in the past?
I have had some notable, I have had someone ask about this property, yes.
Did they offer any reasonable amount for it?
I wasn't given a number, just in a conversation with Eugene, he mentioned he was interested, but.
Have we established a value for the building now?
So we did have Mr. Canuti do a market analysis, so that's what we have up here, based on some comparables, but realizing this really isn't comparable to very much because it's such a historic building. But I believe it was 400,000 or so. It should be on there. And this is just based on what recommended listing price is, so it's not definitive. So there's the range, okay. So, yeah, 413, 750 was,
If you scroll down a couple more, it'll give you a listing recommendation on there.
Where is the square footage of this building? Is it on here someplace?
One more page. There you go.
You don't have the square footage of the building? Maybe I didn't look deep enough into this paper.
we can get that, I don't know if it's on this document, but.
And
So
what,
the idea would be turning this building into something is what you're asking about, is that correct? I just want to make sure I understand.
So I guess I'm asking about the future of this building. The city owns it. We can look at a couple different things. I'd like to invite Tracy up to talk a little bit about that tax incentive idea as well.
I might be old school, but it's very hard for me to accept comparables unless I know the square footage. So that's why I'm asking the question.
So one of the things that is a potential to explore for this area is a Residential Facilities Act, which is a tax abatement, but it would be designed, the council would determine a district, a residential housing district, so this would have to be used for housing. And the district would probably encompass some additional area off of First Street, because it does need to be 1 acre, at least an acre. You can have additional residential facilities districts within your city. It does have 2 income restrictions. So you had mentioned, somebody had mentioned, can you require it to be certain things? So what it does have to be, if you do a Residential Facilities Act housing district, is it can't exceed 120% of our county's AMI. And for example, the AMI for a 2-member household at 120% is $72,720. And the second test, income test, is the rent lease. So if somebody turned into condos or apartments, for example, it could not exceed 30% of the household's income. So again, using that example of a 2-person, our county AMI, that would be, the rent couldn't exceed $1,818. It does need to be at least 4 units or more, and the tax abatement would be a 50% if somebody purchased that and applied for that. And then the council can determine the length of that abatement, anything from 1 year to, I think it's 12 years. So and again, this is just a new housing tool that came through from the state probably in December. So it is relatively new, especially in our region. And I could help, if this is something that the council wanted to pursue, I could help walk through all the requirements to set up that district. And this is just one option in your list of many, but Bill wanted me to touch on it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there a land bank option here?
I haven't had a conversation with the land bank, but I could. I guess I could see if they're,
If that's an option, I mean, we could all the other properties.
that's something I can explore. Yep.
It's a huge building. It's gonna take massive amounts of cash to turn that into anything other than what it is. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars to flip that into housing, 4 units. It's gotta be $700,000 for someone to invest, put in that project to turn that into 4 housing. I don't know how you can make that work.
And I think the,
Money and then rent it out.
yeah, and the thought could be that it becomes like a community area and there's housing around it if you made it part of a bigger project, because you're right, I think that'd be difficult to turn into housing, that particular building. I don't know, Mark, if you wanted to add anything about it being an RRC site, but,
Good evening, everyone. As an RRC site, the one thing that I can add here is that the MEDC will sometimes take a site at the request from the city and do some workups or some renderings of what the potential could be for the site. Now, architecturally, this is a beautiful building.
Yeah.
Right, so I don't think they'd have a lot of work to do, but we would ask them if it's possible for their architect to work up some of the interior. And that is, in my opinion, is the real rub. And Councilmember Bachman just mentioned, the amount of money it will take to put this into use and then your payback for that. I can see someone putting a great deal of money into this, and the return on the investment is going to be a real challenge. So doing an RFP and seeing what kind of information will come back, if you provided something like a rendering from an RRC program, that could be very interesting, and then that would lay out the options for the city manager and city council to explore. I have had contact with interested parties, but by and large those have been in the recreation and hospitality sector. And I do have someone who is inquiring now if they can tour the building. So this is a very timely conversation, and but whatever direction you lay out, we will try to help the city manager execute.
Is it zoned in any particular way? I mean, is it zoned for residential or is it zoned for commercial or could it be?
What is it?
I'll check. I think it's R2, but I'll double check.
Have we ever had this building on the historical?
You want to look at this one?
I believe it is.
I don't believe so, but that's another thing I can check.
I mean, after reading the paper and all the history behind it, so I think somebody would apply for that.
I guess is when the mayor mentioned putting stipulations, I mean, I would assume that we would probably put a stipulation that it couldn't be torn down. I mean, that makes sense in my mind. But I also just wonder if we don't get some community input on what they might want to see there at that site to some degree, because it has been retained by the city for such a long period of time. I think it's going to be something that no matter what we do with it, somebody is not going to be happy. So I think if we just provide the opportunity for people to be heard and put some ideas out on the table, that at least gives us another feedback to kind of bounce some ideas off of. But I do have a concern with putting a stipulation in there that it couldn't be torn down. But when we're talking about tax abatements too, I think I understand there's positives with that and that's going to draw some interest potentially, but I think we have to start being careful about how much we're going to hand out tax abatements for, because we're hearing a lot of feedback on that too. I mean, there's good things with that, but there's also bad things. And some people are not so supportive of that we're handing out tax abatements. I'm hearing it like we're handing it out like it's Halloween candy. Well, you know, there's some hurt feelings because some people are paying full taxes and other people are getting abatements. So I'm not saying I'm opposed to that, but I don't know if I'd say right off the bat I want to go 12 years. I guess it would depend on what that use is. If it's something that's going to give back to the community, maybe you give more of a timeline with that abatement versus if it's somebody who's going to do it in a private realm. That's just my take.
I think we should sell it and see who writes an offer on it, what they plan on doing with it, instead of dumping a bunch of money into it, trying to figure out what we're gonna do with it, and then it sits and sits and sits, and then it needs more money and more money and more money. And I don't think he's far off on his market analysis either. It's just my opinion.
I think we should try to sell it and still have it in a clause saying what you can do with it, because I would hate to see that torn down.
Yeah, I would hate to see it torn down as well, but I agree. Maybe somebody's got a great idea for some
A restaurant or
business
something.
or something that they would do there that would be amazing. It's a very great location. I mean, it's right down the street from First Street Beach and right on that main thoroughfare there. I mean, someone much wiser than me, I'm sure, could come up with a great thing to do there.
Be a cool brewery.
Yeah.
It would be, it would be. So,
Yeah, I agree. I don't have any problem with that.
but yeah, I would hate to see it torn down, so I would love to
Can we
be able
talk
to
to George and see
say,
what kind of stipulations we can put on that?
you know.
I can do that. So not tearing it down and, okay. And then do we want to pursue just see what the MEDC would, they do a little mock-up to show, so we could do an RFP, or we can just put it for sale with stipulations. I guess that's where,
I think we could do both, because that would probably help sell it too. You know, this is what you could do with this property.
okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, we will have a geofencing demonstration from Sammy Lukaskevitz.
Went away. Sorry, it went away.
It's in the website, we minimized it.
Thank you.
Now I gotta do it again. Hi, everyone. I'm Sammy Lukaskevitz from Manistee County Tourism Authority, And I appreciate the time tonight. Given you were talking about Gus Macker, I thought it might be fun to show off our geofence tool that I talked about when I was back here in June. I just mentioned it, and a couple of you have already seen it, but this is the type of technology and tool that I wanted to show you live. So I apologize that you don't have any packet of information about this. It would be very difficult for me to narrow it down. And I can go as long or as short as you want. I love data. This could go 4 hours, it could go 4 minutes. It's really gonna be driven by you, but I thought I'd just give you the high points of what the tourism group is doing with this data. So the first thing to note is this is Manistee County, this blue section. We have the entire county line geofenced. So we work with a company called Vista to look at cell phone data as it goes in and out of our county. And then we break down everyone who visits our county for 4 hours or more based on in-state day trippers, in-state overnighters, out-of-state day trippers, and out-of-state overnighters. And the reason why we can look at these as in-state day trippers and overnighters is because we've excluded anyone who lives within a 50-mile radius of this geofenced area. Because it's safe to assume that if you live within 50 miles, you're probably not gonna be staying in one of our hotels. And as a reminder, the Tourism Authority is funded by a pillow tax that's 5% of hotel room stays. So that's how we make our money. So a Gus Macker tournament, for example, my stake in it would be how many hotel rooms are we driving as a result of having the Gus Macker here. So some of the other things that we've done in addition to geofencing the county, we've also geofenced the hotels and different attraction points throughout Manistee County. So we have an idea of where people are going once they're in the county. We can have an idea of other places that they're visiting throughout the county, and we can even look at their pathway throughout the county. I mean, we only have so many roads that go around the county, but it's nice to see where the traffic is going. This also tracks a heat map of people over time. So if we're looking at, say, a basketball tournament over the course of 3 days, we can look at where are the most crowded parts of our community in addition to what time that traffic is filtering within the community. So we get a little bit of an idea of maybe staffing needs, maybe where gate entry points could be. So we can make a lot of inferences, but I'll tell you that when you look at data, you can analyze data till you go crazy. Data is only good as good as the people looking at the data and then interpreting that data. So some people want to take data for what it is. I love data. But this right here is a snapshot of the year 2023, so from January 1st to a month ago. It takes about a month for our dashboard to catch up. So this information is as of July 8th. The other thing to note is this sample size is just a sample size to give us an indication, but 37,000 people is reflective of a good sample size visiting this community. And so far to date in 2023, 16.7% of our guests are day trippers from within the state of Michigan. About 57% are day trippers, are overnighters from within the state. 4.7 are just day trippers from outside of our state, and about 22% are out-of-staters coming here as tourists and spending the night. We can also look at their length of stay. These charts dissect basically each of our segments, again, the in-state and the out-of-state overnighters and day trippers. And then it kind of looks at their profile as well. So for Manistee County, our in-state day trippers, most guests to Manistee County come from Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, and Battle Creek. So that's where we put our marketing effort. I mean, we are going to fish where the fish are. So if we want people to come to this community, we're probably going to start in Grand Rapids. The next up is Detroit, and then after that is Flint, Saginaw, Bay City. For our in-state overnighters, so these are people who are spending the night in the hotels. Again, Grand Rapids, Detroit, and Flint, Saginaw. But here's where it gets really fun. So these are our out-of-state day trippers. Okay, so people who just visit Manistee, they come to the county, they spend 4 hours in the county, but they're not spending the night, are from Chicago, from Indianapolis, and from Cleveland. Chances are they've probably received some kind of ad from us saying, why aren't you spending the night here? And talking about all the great things that there are to do in Manistee County. And then our last segment of out-of-state overnighters. Again, Chicago, Indianapolis, and Toledo. So these are where guests are coming from outside the state of Michigan and spending the night in one of our hotels. And this data is pretty solid because it's referenced against the hotels that are also geofenced. So we're able to compare some data, or at least the company providing us this dashboard. The other thing to consider is this is only through June. So I haven't even seen, or this is only through July 8th. So I haven't even seen August yet. The amazing part also to know about summer tourism in Manistee is that we're rebounding beyond pre-pandemic levels. So we're seeing people still come and still travel. And then we're able to look at comparison data all the way back to January of 2019. So the beauty of this tool is that we can look at comparison year over year up till now. So that helps us make some decisions as well. So within our market of out-of-state overnighters, the top point of interest for the county is Little River. So most of our guests who come to Manistee County from those areas are going to Little River Casino, but they're also coming downtown. And our downtown is pretty close second as far as our county assets go. Downtown Onekama is very popular, Manistee National Golf. I'm sorry, that was for in-state day trippers. Sorry about that. For our out-of-state overnighters, now this data may change, so, and I apologize, this isn't my computer, so I'm a Mac person, so clicking around on a PC is kind of freaking me out right now. Okay, for our out-of-state overnighters, the #1 destination is downtown Manistee.
Nice.
That is nice, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you
And
have a
then-
campground on here?
Pardon me?
The campground, Orchard Beach campground on here at all? Is that geofenced?
The campground combo, it says down there.
But I think, and you'll have to pardon me because I don't know all of the data points. I believe this campground combo is Orchard Beach and Insta Launch combined. Let's see, what else did I forget? Anything? Okay. Okay, so, and then these are the points of interest that we've also geofenced throughout the community, so or throughout the county. So Arcadia Bluffs, Big M Recreation Area, Brethren, we're able to look a little bit deeper into some of the data that's provided to help us understand what are people doing when they come here. I mean, our beaches are popular, going to Big M Trail is popular, and then once, say, let me pull up downtown Manistee. So once we look at downtown Manistee, we can also glean some other information about the sample sizes with them. So let's see, end market. So this is where they go when they're downtown. Obviously, it's downtown. So you have a little bit of a bird's eye of the pathing of where people are gathering once they're downtown. And again, this is only January 1st to July 8th. So we look at this monthly. At the end of the year, I'll go back segment by segment and look month by month for total number of visitors, what their top locations are, the pathways in that they take to get here. And it's just a fun little tool to look around, and also helps us place our media, because we know that these cell phones that we're looking at, and again, I don't know the people's names, I just know that there's a cell phone in this area. So no one's privacy is being invaded here. But this company also helps place our ads. So we're able to not only look at the people, but we can build some lookalike audiences to the people who are visiting, so we have a little bit better idea of who we need to target for our advertising. Need me to keep going on, or questions, or anything that we can, if there's other information that you want, or if you want a more in-depth presentation, I'm certainly happy to bring in Simon. He's our representative at NEAR, who could give the real nerdy presentation of this whole thing. But I'm happy to answer some questions or look at some data or whatever, just to help you out.
You showed the Ramsdale, or you talked about the Rams. Is that easy to pull up to
Yeah.
show where people for that?
So we had a study session today about the Ramsdale. Here's the geofence of the Ramsdale within the county. Sorry, I gotta go back to this button. So the Ramsdale Theater, about 13% of their guests are in-state day trippers. About 67% of their guests actually spend the night here. I would imagine they probably come to a show and then get a hotel room. Their sample size is pretty small because they don't have the traffic that, say, a Little River Casino would have. And then out-of-state overnighters is about 18%.
You can track festivals too, can't you?
I can. We can actually build reports where we can look back and go back in time. So, for example, I built a report on the Sleigh Bell Parade last year just to get an idea of where guests were coming from. And you essentially enter an address, and then you just geofence off an area. So I geofenced the parade route. So that's last year's Sleigh Bell Parade, to take a look at that and just get an idea of the visitation over time. So, oops, sorry about that. The heaviest parts of day for Sleigh Bell was about 7 after the parade. So these were when it was peaking. But again, downtown gets pretty popular midday for Sleigh Bell Parade. I think y'all know that. And these are the clusters. It looks at the technology looks at the common location for your cell phone at night and your cell phone during the day to make some inferences. If your cell phone at night is always in Onekama, you're probably an Onekama resident. And I'm just using Onekama as an example. We don't geofence local people. We try to exclude those. If your cell phone at night is in Ludington, you're probably from Ludington. So it makes some, I guess, assumptions from that. But the visitor origin points for the common daytime location for the Sleigh Bell Parade, and we'll go look at it by states. This is where the daytime location is for all the cell phones that attended the Sleigh Bell Parade last year. And the pathway for them to get here was, you know, these are our roads, but this is the pathway. And then it gives some information on their visitor profile. So we can look at some of their affinities. I mean, A&W, PNC Bank, Auto Value, Dairy Queen. These are some of the brands that they like to frequent. And then these are the demographics of those whose cell phones. So everything from ethnicity to income, education, and also their age. So rather than just making assumptions and looking around and going, yeah, this looks like it's this kind of crowd or whatever, we actually have some figures that we can look at. And it just helps us make better decisions with our marketing and our attraction efforts to the county. But it's pretty easy to go back in a report. I just need an area. It's being very stubborn with me. It's probably me. Basically, I would get a map of the United States, and I could go back and circle anything. So say we see something in a community that is doing something really, really well. We can look at what that community is doing by geofencing it and getting some information about who's going there. Now, when you do stuff like that, recognize that they can do the same thing with us. But essentially, let's see. So if I wanted to draw a location to geofence, I could geofence, say, the Visitors Bureau. I'll just do this little corner right there. I would put a time frame. So I could do an entire year, I could do it by a month, or I could do a specific day or time. It starts to confuse the system if you drill down too deep. Like if I tried to do an hour, I was going to pull the Budweiser Clydesdale event, but narrowing something to a 2-hour window gets a little specific. Essentially, I would just create the report from here based on the parameters, and in a couple of days, it would give me a report on where the visitors to the Visitors Bureau came from and what time they were there. And because this was over the course of the year, we could see what are the most popular days of the week. So we could, Sherry, who works for the Tourism Authority as well, we could look at that and go, oh, maybe it's okay to close on Mondays because we don't get a lot of traffic.
Anybody else?
It's really interesting, actually, almost scary. But I think it helps us a lot to know who's actually coming to town from outside the 50-mile
It does.
radius, too.
Yeah, the Manistee County Sheriff was going after a grant for a boat, and they wanted to know about the number of people at events. So I pulled a couple of reports and pulled what some events draw in the area. But further, I looked at these events and then looked at the pathway in. And for them to have a boat, particularly on some of the events where people bring in a boat here. I mean, we're a water port, so some people travel by boat to get here. I mean, that's a means of transportation. So to help them build a case to say the pathway to Onekama Days means people could come in off of Lake Michigan into Portage Lake, so that's a vulnerable spot. I mean, that's helpful data that we can back up with real-time technology to showcase that.
I had a question on this Gus Macker event in Ludington. Would you be able to pull data from the Ludington area?
Why, certainly I could do that.
Well, that would be interesting for us to know, I think.
Yeah, where are the people coming from?
He didn't actually answer my question on the amount of space. Do you think that we have enough space? to hold a Gus Macker? Like,
It depends on the time of year.
amount of people that you have coming in?
Yeah, it depends on the time of year.
Okay.
You know, a summertime event, we have 1,200 hotel rooms in this county. I'd look for more information from him on where are people traveling from, how many rooms they would look for, how far out would they stay from the venue or where the event is being hosted. Because again, I'm a countywide entity, so not all of our hotels are in Manistee.
Okay.
Would people drive from the Alpine Inn or Motel Bear Lake or Sunset Valley Resort to come to a basketball tournament in Manistee? I don't know those answers.
Okay.
I can tell you that our July numbers, we're probably going to be at 90% capacity as far as our hotels go. So it would be very difficult to host an event in, say, July. It would be great to host an event in September, knowing some of the other information, but there's not enough information to have a stand one way or another.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Gamble, do you have anything else?
Nothing else, thank you. Thank you, Sam.
Go ahead.
First, I want to say it's National Pickleball Day. This is leading to something else. I take and talk to the beaches who are involved with pickleball quite heavily. They keep sending me reports, and if you notice on TV, they had a big presentation about the malls are now turning into pickleball malls for the senior citizens, for kids are really playing this game. So it's really picked up all over the country. They have almost every day a report on pickleball. And even the people from Fox News was out playing pickleball this morning. And so I'm having a problem with, we talked about it, Jeff, before, about turning 8th Street into a volleyball court or whatever, when I think the older people, we're getting so many, I mean, even Onekma is looking at them, Friso, different places. I think we're missing out again, and we should be doing something. People, beaches said that they had to build the one in different places. They had a lot of the people involved in it who went out and got money and helped to build the thing. I think we're losing out on 8th Street. I also looked at 5th Avenue, the basketball courts there, they're in poor shape, but things could be changed around. I know the school offered, when we talked about tearing them out, that you said the school would be involved, they'd pay some of it. I have a problem with that, being I'm a voter, and we voted millage in for him to do the schools, and now they're giving money for something else. I think that he ought to do the schools and quit doing other things that what we gave him the money for, because they had the second millage. And a lot of people are mad about that, that now we're spending the money again. I mean, do we go into a third millage? So then the thing is, if you build something else over there, you're talking about putting sidewalks in. And of course, we've talked about plowing sidewalks, people shoveling their sidewalk. Who's gonna shovel that sidewalk? You know, we don't have anybody, any old people up there to shovel them, or whoever, unless the city's gonna plow them. And we talked about getting out of that business. So I'd like to know some answers about why we can't be working on something to put something in there. Even into the fall, they play into October, November pickleball. And so I think we're missing out again. Also, how are we coming on those steps at City Hall, Bill?
So I've talked to Mark Hansen. He said, I think they ordered materials. I'm hearing another week or two, but I heard 2 weeks
Who's gonna
ago.
build
So.
them?
The first quote, gentlemen, so I think the $18,000 quote is going to be working on that.
Okay, well, this has been going on since May. I think it's time to get these things done. I don't know how much longer we want to wait. People are talking about climbing the steps there or coming in the back doors to use the elevator.
Can I ask a question about the steps? I don't mean to interrupt, but do we not have the capacity within the DPW to put those steps together? I mean, $18,000 seems like a lot of money to me. Like when we were already over budget and we took money out, and put that in for other things with maintenance of City Hall, and now we're $18,000. Where is that coming from?
So we did have a budget for City Hall maintenance aside from that 20,000, and that's where it would be coming from.
Yeah, we can't do that kind of work.
I did meet with Jeff and Brandon out there a couple times. It is the tuck pointing. It's more of a complicated, the mason, to work on that, you need someone who knows what they're doing in terms of making sure that deterioration doesn't happen. You don't have, you have it pitched correctly so that you don't have infiltration of water down there. So, I mean, my thought, you know, can we frame it? Can we pour one step at a time, lay it on top? I mean, that's a possibility, but we don't want it to look bad. This is the front steps of our City Hall. This is something you should have a professional work on. We want it to last a while. Right, you want a mason to work on something like this. It's not, and to just pour concrete, frame it, yes, but to have the granite and have it look nice and last a long time, we want to make sure.
From that's going to do it? Where are they from?
I can send you the quote again tomorrow if you would like.
I'm just curious. I don't remember where they were.
Yeah, and I don't either. It's been a while. And we've tried to get several other quotes. We had one for a couple thousand. We've had a lot of non-responsive masons, so it has been frustrating. But we do want to get it done, so I appreciate, I think myself, council, city employees, I hear about it quite regularly. We would like to get it done. So that's why we're moving with the one responsive quote.
Jeff, are we ever gonna get those weeds cut on the highway? I've asked you about that before. From 8th Street on down to 3rd Street. I mean, we wanna have a good looking community and we got these weeds growing.
And when we get a complaint like that, I have staff go out and look at it, and then we send out letters when it's appropriate.
Well, by the time we get the letters and they come back, or even an answer, I mean, couldn't we just send one kid down there? You gotta echo these kids. I know you're short of help because Mickey went and one guy walked off the field.
The process, right, the process is determined by the noxious weed ordinance, so that's the process that we follow.
Oh, right. But the thing is, I mean, by the time you send the letter out, it's gonna be September. And, you know, one kid could go and cut up and down and be done with it all, I think. I mean, if you want me to do it, I'll come out and get everyone more to do it.
Well, one of the problems is when we do that, then we train them that they don't have to do it, and we're gonna do it all the time for them. So this is the process that we use for all of those noxious weeds.
Are we putting it on the tax roll if we do have to cut it?
We send them a bill,
Okay.
well, if we do cut it. Usually the letter gets a lot of compliance.
All right.
I was gonna ask about the steps, so.
Are you done, Jim? Jim,
Were you done?
Yes,
are you ignoring me?
possible.
Do you have anything?
I just had one thing I wanted to bring up. Well, actually two. So I know at the last council meeting, Councilmember Pontiac had mentioned about brush pickup, and you had said, Mr. McCullough, that you want people to still call in, but if you drive by, you pick it up. I'm not seeing that happening. Like, I hate to be the naysayer on that, but you guys are working on 2nd Street on that curb still, and there's a huge brush pile that's been sitting out for weeks, and multiple times a day, city vehicles are going by. I mean, I watched the brush truck go by the one time and nobody stopped. I mean, it's a huge pile. So people are complaining about that. The other thing is, I don't know if we need to potentially look at closing some restrooms or something, but I get a call every day from somebody about restrooms, and I went and looked. I mean, to be honest with you, the condition is pretty horrible most times. Like, I wouldn't use it. I would rather use a porta potty. And that's saying a lot because I'm the person that will wait till I get home to do it. But 2 people called me today and said that they used the marina restrooms early in the morning. So those doors, I believe, are on a timer and unlock at 8. Is that correct?
I don't know the time, I think it's a little earlier than that.
Well, they said they used them at around 8 o'clock, and they said the women's restroom door still does not work correctly, and that's, I know, been mentioned before, but they said the restrooms were disgusting in the marina. So I don't know, are they getting cleaned at night? Like, is there a way we can pay somebody to potentially come in early and clean those before they open? I don't know, like, somehow I think we have to be more proactive, and if we can't keep all the restrooms clean, then maybe we need to start closing some of them down.
There are 13 different public restrooms that we clean on a daily basis, but the staff starts at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. I'm just gonna let you know that I had reached out several times about one because several residents complained. I took pictures multiple weeks in a row. The same wadded up toilet paper was in the corner for 4 weeks. So people might be reporting to you that they're cleaning those restrooms daily. I'm not saying that they aren't saying that to you, but I don't think they're actually getting cleaned daily. I mean, at Lighthouse Park, you know, that's for young children. The baby changing stations in there had mold on them and mildew for weeks. I wouldn't put an infant on that table. That's saying a lot when that is the condition, and people are calling me and saying, hey, and then you bring it up, and 3 weeks later, we still have the same issue. And I went down there because I thought, you know what, somebody probably saw it a week ago. But when you walk in, and you only walk into the men's, but it's the same condition, that says a lot. And I'm not saying that, but I think we're counting on kids to clean a lot of those. But who's managing those kids? Is there a checkoff sheet for them where they're initialing daily? So if there's an issue, you can go back and say, oh, Seth was responsible for that restroom today. I need to have a conversation with him. Because I don't think they're truly getting cleaned daily. So I think there's a disconnect there. But I could be wrong.
I've gotten complaints about the bathroom as well, but that actually was more related to First Street Beach and concessions down there when that was kind of flipping over, but I've gotten that too, so I don't know, maybe that's something.
I just got a quick question, Jeff. Do you have, you don't have to come back up here, do you have a checklist for them, for like cleaning the bathrooms?
The previously, no. Our lead man has left employment, and so we're managing that in a different way the last week and a half, and we've started putting that together now.
Okay. That's all I was wondering. Okay, thank you. Hold on a second.
Bill, are they moving those tables off of River Street? Have we talked about the tag and the talk about it?
Yeah, so I think Chief Glass has talked to one of the property owners to talk about it. They were moving it as he left. We have a DDA meeting tomorrow, but I think we want to work with the DDA to get a message out. I think it's different if the DDA brings it up to them as opposed to the police, but we just want them to be aware they're supposed to have a 5-foot between whatever barrier they have for the tables and the curb or a light post or a garbage can. So I think these restaurants have been popular, but they have to make sure that there is access and right of way.
Are you finished now, Mr. Grabowski?
You sure? Okay.
Just double checking. I don't have a problem with us eventually selling the Waterworks building. What I think I would like to see happen before we take our vote on it, because we do have to vote on it at a council meeting, is I need to make sure the public can come to our next meeting and be aware that this would be an agenda item that we would vote on. And I want to hear some input from them to see if they have any ideas about something great that can be done with the building. So I don't want to blindside the public in something that's a city asset like this, that's been an iconic building that everybody identifies with in the whole city, that's lived here for a while. So that's my take on the Waterworks building for now. Thank you.
I just wanted to understand what are we doing next about this Gus Macker thing? I know that he said he needs a decision by October, but are we going to talk about this again? Is there, what would be the next step?
I'm going to talk to George about Councilman Bachman's question. You hear that about events, but if we consider it a community event, I'm sure we could sign it, but I'm going to get his opinion on that. We can also sit down and talk about what would a successful event look like, and is it feasible to have the amount of volunteers we'd need, and how many. I think we wanted to try to break even, and do we have some partners that would like to work with us on it? I think if we were going to do it, we'd have to probably set up an ad hoc committee and involve some other groups. I think that we'd identify as sponsors or people we'd work with on it.
I think I'd like to see another agency take the lead on it, like the casino somewhere. I think it's asking a lot for the city and it's actually to take the lead on this. He didn't sell me on that project with everything he had to say tonight. So if there's an entity like the Rotary, which the Rotary doesn't exist, but if there's an entity out there, which I don't know that there is, we can support them, I'd be all for that. But if the time comes, we're gonna vote on whether the city's gonna pay for that, based on his presentation tonight, I couldn't vote to commit the city to that based on what he said tonight.
I'd have to agree with that. I think the partnering with the casino and maybe still having it downtown would be better, and then having another agency. Because I don't see the volunteer for that either.
And if I could, Mayor, under other, I was going to have Tracy, if you wanted to give an update on the NEZ, just kind of the process for that. Sure. Cool. Thank you.
So I think maybe why Bill asked me to do this is we wrote a grant to the Rural Readiness grant that just came out. And it was for a contract position to help with administrative tasks with the NEZ, but a portion of that would also be to assist the city with any type of maybe community events, which could possibly be the Gus Macker, or other type of events, as well as grant writing and some additional responsibilities that Bill would have them work on. But in terms of the NEZ, Manistee ranked highest in its aging home stock. So most homes were built in 1963, and this is from our most recent, Housing North's most recent needs assessment, which next month I'll come to you and talk about that full data and the needs assessment results. But it also found that 7% of the homes in Manistee have incomplete plumbing, bathrooms, kitchens, and unsafe living conditions.
How many percent?
7%.
I thought you said 70, I was like.
No. But in comparison to other counties in our region, as well as the state comparison, is significantly higher than any of those other counties. So the NEZ would help in part to address some of those issues. And some of the things that I've worked on, I've talked with the Planning Commission. They sent a letter to Bill supporting the NEZ and that it coincided with the master plan. Economic Development also supported and agreed that it fit within our economic community goals. And then I also met with the city assessor. And one of the questions when I was here at a study session you had asked was, could you decide on a different amount of years other than, I think it's a 12 to 15. So yes, you can do that. It can be anywhere from 7 to 12 years. That's at your discretion to determine what that year would, those number of years would be if you choose to do that. So I think some of the things to move forward are that this assessor would need to provide the true cash value of the property located within that NEZ zone. And then I've provided some samples to Bill for the policies from other communities that have NEZs. So we would need to, and I also have sample resolutions, so we need to develop goals, a policy, and a resolution. And then the city attorney would need to review all those. And we would also then need to have a public hearing 45 days prior to the notice being sent that you would adopt a resolution or entertain adopting a resolution. So I think that we are at the point to determine whether or not you would like me to continue to move forward. So, but you don't have to make a decision today. Anything else, Bill?
No, thank you, Tracy. I just wanted to thank Tracy for her work on that. So there's a couple steps, and I think getting someone here that could help with that administrative burden, because it is a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of things to track and work through with homeowners. So I think we're in a good spot. So we'll wait to see if we get that grant, and then I think we move forward after that.
And the grant, they're supposed to decide in September whether or not the grant was awarded. We do have the option, the phase 2 of the grant came out. If we aren't awarded the grant for this, they did say that we could be automatically submitted, if we choose to, we could be automatically submitted into round 2 of the grants without me having to go back through and redo the entire grant.
Motion to adjourn?